All right, peeps, welcome to the Culture and People cast. Mark, in a few sentences, tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And I think, keeping it super short, I'm really just a human on this planet like the rest of us. And for me, really have set everything forward to unpack the questions that shape the lives of other humans so that AI can live a fulfilled and meaningful and performance-driven life as well, but also help others do the same thing.
Oh, that was beautiful. That's one of the best intros. I love it. So, because you do work in this, and I'll let you expand more for the listeners who don't know you as well, but you've done so much around just that whole mental health side of humanity. And so, I definitely think you're in the crew of positively impacting people and culture. But what's the best thing about that for you?
Well, I think it's just seeing people light up and finding what really lights them up, essentially, or that journey of discovery. Because I had to go through it myself in the corporate world and also as an entrepreneur now. So I think just seeing people, the spark in their eye when it happens, and just I think the biggest thing when it comes to mental health and mental fitness, just being able to help people find the tools
Yeah.
that they can leverage and use at a moment's notice, because it's those tools can be used at work, at home, and in really any situation to help process whatever the day is going to throw at you, because it is going to happen. We can guarantee, right? So just finding what works for people that's personalized, right, is really what lights me up.
I love that because I think that's part of the true definition of leadership for me, Mark, is, I talk to leaders all the time, and depending on the stats, 8 out of 10 leaders are never going to be great leaders or whatever that is. Okay. We're dealing with humans who are flawed. Get that. That's our
Sure.
baseline. But a lot of the leaders will come back and say like, well, I don't know. I don't know what they need. And I'm like, look, you're not there to do their job. You don't have to. That's why you hired them. But it's your job to give them the resources, tools,
Yeah.
and support that they deserve. And so, even just being knowledgeable as a leader about the tools that would work, knowing that not one tool will work for everybody, right? Having
Yeah.
that menu.
Exactly. Well, and the menu gives you the confidence as well. Like sometimes just having a menu or a list of tools when you're handling something or in a tough situation or trying to make a big decision on a project or like whatever it is, having that confidence that, oh yeah, you know what, I have a set of tools that I can lean on if I need them to process through this. And I think someone once had told me, I think it's Chip Conley, who self-identifies as the modern elder. He ran a pretty successful boutique hotel firm, or yeah, hotel company for 20 plus years, and sold it, and then was the mentor and intern for Brian Chesky at Airbnb. So this whole idea of modern elder came up because he was an older guy, ton of wisdom, but at the same time was the one listening. And the piece of advice, he gave is, it's, as a mentor, it's not about kind of throwing up your wisdom and your advice. It's really helping people find through questions their path, right? And helping them get to the answer. So what I often think of him, because now it's been a few years of the podcast. There's literally thousands of reflective prompts that I've been able to get from these guests. And for me, it's just leveraging these questions so that people can come to their tools, their path, and their own kind of self-discovery on their own. Because otherwise it just doesn't work, right? I can be very prescriptive on something that works for me, but it
Mm-hmm.
may not work for you, or it may work for you for the first week. And then like anything, if it doesn't fit, like we're just less likely to do whatever that is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. This is where I think the parallel between leaders and parenting is so strong because
Yeah.
we can't control anybody. We can't control your 4-year-old, my 10-year-olds,
Yeah.
that 54-year-old that works with us. That's not our job, is to control them, right? It's just
Sure.
to point them in the right direction. So I loved what you said though, Mark, about finding the answers through those questions. Like, what is their path? And being really curious. That's one of the
Yeah.
top strengths that I think. I want to get to some tactical advice from you, maybe
Sure.
some of those question response, but first I just want to hear maybe overall your thinking in terms of engagement. I'm hearing from other leaders that just engaging their employees is a challenge. What are your thoughts overall on that?
Well, I think especially now, given everything we're going through, again, it's less about being prescriptive about things and really just, I think, holding space. Someone like Claude Silver, who's a chief people officer or heart officer, I should say, at VaynerMedia. I mean, when I talked to her, it was really about just being there and holding space for someone and listening and following those cues and slowly kind of guiding them to wherever they need to go or help them find that path. Because I think right now, I mean, people are so confused. There's so much fear and uncertainty with everything going on that, like, you can't ignore that. And I don't think you could ever ignore that, but we always kind of looked at, hey, how can we help our people so that, we can increase our sales or increase our performance, versus if the human at the core of the organization, those humans are thriving and feel motivated and are waking up happy and all of that, 1,000%, your business, it has to thrive if it's the right business, obviously. But like, it's so much harder to operate, to create, and perform at your best when you're operating from a fear state, right? So, I think right now, if I was sitting in an organization, like a VaynerMedia, or had a responsibility around people, it would be solely focusing on them personally, and
Mhm.
and not trying to fire off a mass plan,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, very individualized leadership, which I think, given the state of leadership, feels very overwhelming for some people. But guys,
Sure.
and I know people hear us say terms like holding space and like do a little eye roll, and maybe we get some like hippy dippy vibes. But I believe that that goes to what you're saying, which is like, I'm going to like think about myself sitting next to you and just like holding as much space for all of the challenges that you're going through personally right now. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you define holding space when you think about that from a leader? Like, how can they get that in their head, what that actually looks or feels like?
Sure. I mean, I think it's a one simple prompt that will unleash that. And, depending on how many people are in your team, obviously it's harder to do this. And again, just like, the advice you may give, be kind to yourself, right? Like, if you can speak to one person or five people for that week, then that's more than zero, for example, right? So, just something as simple, if it's in person or even virtual now, just jumping on the phone and like, how are you doing? Right.
Yeah.
And then, really, no, like, really, how are you doing? And just let the person speak.
Yeah.
And there doesn't have to be a solution that comes out of that, or a massive direction, but just being there. I think that's holding space and
Mhm.
listening. And I don't know. I mean, when I was in the corporate world for 10 years, I wish I had that. I mean, I can't imagine if someone asked me something like that, I would remember that. It's just like, I remember some of these bigger companies, the president would do the rounds and he or she would have lunch, right, with teams and employees. And it was like, that was the talk. And, I get to sit next to the president and ask questions. I don't think that should be some sort of spectacle or outside of the norm. Like, if you could do that, and especially if you're in charge of leading people, one question like that for 5 minutes could
Mhm.
go so far.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been using the phrase "How's your spirit," which
Yeah,
tends to, like people go, "Ooh, that's an interesting question." But guess what? I get better answers when I ask that versus "How you doing?"
sure.
Because what's our automatic answer is, "Oh, good, we're good," and then we accept it. But I think what you're talking about is that access to leaders, that
Yeah,
should be more of the norm. And leaders shouldn't be afraid that when you do that, you're suddenly becoming someone's therapist. You don't have to solve the problems. You just listen, be
totally.
curious, ask questions,
Yeah.
follow up, right? I think that's a good part,
Yeah.
right? Don't just like talk to them once and then find out, they've had a sick family member and then never ask about it again. I
Yeah,
think the
that
one responsibility you have.
for sure. I mean, that's definitely a whole other podcast. But I mean,
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, it's not just, how are you doing it? That follow up, how are you doing, is just as important. Or I like your twist on it. So that's a cool question.
Yeah. Okay, Mark, we're going to go to part two here so I can get
Sure.
this last question in because I really want to jam with you. So one sec. Okay.
Yeah.